I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome to the Gravity Block of the Month. I will be here each month to give an overview of the blocks for that month. So here we are in month one. Month one is called Horizon, and we are going to make 2 blocks each month from the same pattern, different colors. So they're going to look similar but not the same. So here are the 2 Horizon blocks. We're going to have a greenish block and we're going to have a coral block. And we're going to be cutting diamonds with the Super Sidekick ruler. This book is the Gravity book that is exclusive to the Northcott Quilt Kit. Please be sure to read all of the directions before beginning. If you are familiar with Gravity, this is its 10-year anniversary. If you happen to have the original version of the book, you can follow along with the sew along as well. I want to share a quick PSA. I am filming these cutting demonstrations with sample fabric, not with the fabric from a kit like yours. So this will not be an exact replication of your experience with your kit, and I'll do my best on how to guide you to make a quilt with fabric from a kit throughout this process. As you can see, the edges of my squares are straight as I have cut these from sample fabric. Yours will be pinked, which means they'll have the zigzag. On page 6 of the book, I provide a disclaimer about diamonds. There is very little fabric waste allowance when cutting 2 diamonds from a single 3.5 inch by 10 inch strip. You'll have just enough fabric, especially when you go ahead and cut the points off, as I will show you. This may be an issue if your fabric for some reason is not 10 inches by 10 inches and you end up with a square that is slightly smaller, whether you're working with fabric from your stash or whether your pre-cut is just a little bit smaller because they're made by machines and machines aren't perfect. Have no fear. I'm going to go over some other methods so that you will still be able to get the fabric you need to create your blocks. Alternatively, you can also go ahead and cut additional diamonds from a coordinating fabric. Best practices for cutting from pre-cut fabric kits anytime you are working with fabric for a kit is to measure the pre-cuts twice before cutting. So here's what that looks like. I'm going to take my square and I'm going to measure to make sure that it is 10 inches. And I'm going to do that in both directions. Not all fabrics are cut equally. It's just the nature of manufacturing pre-cut kits. One person isn't individually cutting each individual piece of fabric. They're cut en masse with machinery, and not all cuts will be perfect as a result of the production process. Another note is that you do not have enough fabric to pre-wash or to starch these fabrics before cutting with them. If that is how you prefer to sew, you may need additional fabric. I don't recommend pre-washing them or starching them, as they will shrink and you may not have enough fabric to complete your quilt. Each month you are going to be making 2 blocks from the same pattern and different fabrics. So it'll look like 2 different blocks in the quilt, but it's the same pattern. So for month 1, block Horizon, these are the 2 blocks and they belong to the green and the orange family. I've gone ahead and made a identifying sheet that has the block name, the letter, and the SKU. What the SKU is the identifying name that fabric manufacturers use. So if you do run short, you can find the correct fabric. I like to clip these onto my fabrics before I cut them and then onto my pieces after they're cut to help keep myself organized. That way I can follow the diagrams in the book and not worry about mixing the fabrics up. Since we are working with 6 green fabrics and then 6 orange fabrics, it can be easy to mix things up. This is a free download that I've made for you. You can go ahead and click on the link in the caption below and I will email that to you. We're going to go from 10-inch squares to cut pieces to a completed block. I'm going to walk you through step by step how we're going to get there. When you get your fabric, if you are working with the Northcott Gravity kit, which most of you probably are, especially if you're watching this video as it airs at the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, the fabrics will be in your kit in order. So A, B, C, so forth and so on. And I like to then cut out my squares and label them. I already went ahead and cut A, and then I realized a better way to show you. So pardon me that my A is not a square here, but I'm going to use some white fabric and show you how to cut out your diamonds and how to troubleshoot in case your square is not big enough. So what I have gone and done is I have taken some fabric from my stash, some white fabric, and I cut a 10-inch by 10-inch square, and you can see this one's smaller. I've cut one 9 3/4 by 9 3/4. So have no fear if yours is too small. I'm going to walk you through how we can troubleshoot so that you can still get your diamonds. We'll begin with a square that is 10 by 10. And the directions for block 1 are on page 12 of your book. And as I mentioned earlier, the diamond cutting directions are on page 6. And for the A fabric, we need to get 4 diamonds. So as you can see from the ones that I've already cut, if I lay them perfectly on top of another one, there is not really any waste on the right and the left. And then we have this one strip at the top that we can use for cutting our triangle for our bonus pillow, but this strip is not big enough to cut another diamond. So we want to be extra careful. So if you've never cut with my rulers before, I highly suggest that you cut from a scrap first to practice, just to get familiar. So what we need to do is we want 3.5-inch diamonds, so we need to cut 3.5-inch strips from our square. Now, if you are working with fabric from the kit and you have the pinked edges, you do have enough wiggle room to go ahead and cut a tiny bit off to straighten up your edge. Only do that on the one side though, don't do that on all 4. So you take your edge that is straight and we're going to cut a 3.5-inch strip. And then we are going to cut a second one. You don't need to do that from all the fabrics, but when you need multiple diamonds, cut 2 strips. There is a diagram on the top of page 12 that shows you how many you need from each of the fabrics. So now that I have my 3.5-inch strips, I can decide which ruler I'm going to use to cut them. So the Super Sidekick is the ruler that is listed on the back of the pattern, and this ruler will be used in many blocks throughout the pattern, but many of you, if you've been around for other sew-alongs of mine, have the Sidekick, and the Sidekick can often be used as well. It depends on the size of the shape. So for instance, for month 2, we definitely need the Super Sidekick because it does 1.5 through 8.5, but the Sidekick does 1.5 through 4.5. So I'm going to show you here how we could cut with either one of these rulers, since this is a 3.5-inch strip and it fits on both of them. So we'll begin with the Super Sidekick. And following the diagram on page 6, what we want to do is line up our 3.5-inch solid line on the top of our fabric and the base of our ruler here. And we want to take just the edge of our ruler, just a hair. This is the detail photo that I show you in the middle of page 6. And this is just because we are going to cut the point of that off later on in the bottom right corner of page 6. So we want to have just a little bit of the edge off. And that way we're going to be able to fit them both perfectly on the strip. So we're going to go ahead and cut. Okay, and then following my diagram, I'm going to go ahead and rotate my fabric around. And note that I am right-handed. If you are left-handed, this will be backwards for you. I suggest you look at your book and then read the directions and then rotate your book around 180 degrees, because then the pictures in the book will match how you are cutting with the ruler. So let me show you what that looks like. So we're talking about page 6. So read your directions and then rotate it around, and then the ruler orientation will match how you cut left-handed. Since I'm right-handed, I'm going to go ahead and line up my 3.5-inch solid line around and cut. And then I'm just going to slide my ruler down to cut my next piece, and it's going to end up right on the edge, or as shown in the detail in the middle right-hand side of page 6. It might be off the edge, and that's okay because we are going to cut the tips off as long as you get both on there and trim. And then now what we're going to do is we want to cut the points off of our diamonds so that they will look like this. That will help us with alignment later on. If we have 2 diamonds like this, I'll show you with a green and with a white. When you go put them right sides together, you're not exactly sure. I mean, that's definitely way too far, but you're not sure, do I get up there? You know, if you go all the way up there, when you open it up, it's not going to be flat. You're kind of playing a little bit of a guessing game, where if you have 2 that have the blunt points, you will be able to put them on top of each other like this and perfectly know where to align them to sew. So let's go ahead and I will show you how we are going to cut the tips off.
And this is also shown in a diagram on the bottom of page 6. And we are going to take our diamond that we cut like this, and we're going to rotate it so that it is underneath the triangle portion of the ruler. And we're going to line up the solid line here and the edge of our ruler with our diamond. And it's just going to be that little 1/4 inch of a triangle off the end, and trim. Rotate it around, repeat the same thing. This does take a little bit of time, but I find it really helps with alignment. So I find a little bit of time spent doing this on the front end can really help save time later on. So we're going to repeat that with all of our diamonds. Now I will show you how, if you have the sidekick, and if you don't have either ruler, I suggest getting the super sidekick because it will do what you need for all of the diamond needs for this project. But if you happen to have this one, it is nice and handy. So I just want to show you that it is an option as well. So again, we're going to line up the 3.5 inch line in the base of the ruler. Just go a tiny bit off the edge there. And you don't want to go far off the edge because then you're going to be into your piece. The dashed line on the inside of every shape shows you where your stitching eventually will be. The solid line is the edge of your seam allowance. So you don't want to go too far, just a little bit. And again, rotate it around and cut our diamonds down the strip. And then after we have cut the diamonds, we can go ahead and trim off the points so that we will know exactly where to align everything later on in our process. And so if these were A, which they would have been, what I would do at this point is stack them together once all the points are cut off and take my A and clip it from here onto my piece so that I can keep myself nice and organized. Now, what do you do if you measure your fabric and it is not 10 inches? So as I mentioned earlier, this square is 9 3/4 and 9 3/4. There is an alternate way of cutting 4 diamonds from this. And this is what it's going to look like. Instead of cutting them in strips, because if you see, if we lay that out, we lose too much here and we don't have enough. We are going to cut one from each corner. And if you can imagine taking your ruler, whether it's a sidekick or the super sidekick, lining up your 3.5 inch solid line on the side and going right to the edge there, just a little bit past, just like we did earlier. That's where the piece is going to be cut. And so I'm going to lay these out to show you what that would look like. So that is what that would look like. So we don't have the extra strip. We don't have as much usable leftover fabric, but we still do have enough space here to cut a triangle for our stellar pillow if you're interested in making the pillow that is at the end of the book. We're just going to cut them in a different way. So this is plan B. This is a backup, so that don't panic if you measure your square and it's not big enough. We've got a backup plan. So let me take this one away and I will show you how I would cut this. As I mentioned, I would line up my solid line on the edge here and either come right to my point or a tiny bit off, just as I showed you on page 6. And the most important thing here is normally when you're cutting, you cut completely, and you don't want to cut completely because you're going to cut into where that one is. So I want to line this up, and then I want to just cut to here and then cut there so I don't cut into the rest of my usable fabric. So this is what that looks like. Always tends to happen when I'm recording. Okay, so now we have that. And then we'll repeat around, but to get the rest of the diamond shape, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and line it up like on page 6 in the regular directions, as if we were cutting from a strip all along. And we'll align the part we just cut, the base of our ruler, the 3.5 inch solid line. Double check, always want to double check. And cut. And then I can go ahead and cut my points off just as I did here. And if you're having trouble visualizing this, I find that it is helpful to lay pieces out. So go ahead and cut some diamonds from a scrap fabric and lay them on top of your square that is not big enough. And then you'll know exactly where they are so that you don't end up cutting one in a weird way and then not having enough fabric. I find that very helpful. So again, we'll take this one and we're just going to take our ruler and if you kind of need, if you don't have these, another visual I have found is if you take any of the corners of your fabric and you line up first your ruler itself so that the ruler's on there, and then you kind of just keep pulling until you get to the solid line and to the point. And that is where we want to be. Again, cut, don't want to go too far, and cut. And then we'll turn and recut, and I'll repeat that process till I have as many diamonds as I need. For some fabrics like A, it's 4. For others, it's 3 or 2. But this is an option so that you don't need to panic if your square is not large enough. And the directions again for how many to cut from each fabric are on page 12. So go ahead and cut all of your diamonds and clip your pieces on to keep them organized. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful for you, be sure to like it, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Show us your progress on your gravity blocks in our Facebook group. We'd love to see how you're coming along with your quilt. The link to the Facebook group is below. I'll be back here in the next video to show you how to piece block 1.